Thank you everybody for coming on a Friday night. Welcome to Malvern Books. I think probably all of you have been here before, but if you have not, please browse the shelves and look at their amazing collection. So this is Borderless, Conversations on Art, Action, and Justice, which is about the power of words and the role of art in reflecting and changing our world. In this interview series, you hear from emerging and established writers about how and why they write and why it matters. This is a series about breaking down borders between people, between forms of expression, between identities and nations, between art and action, and tonight between young adult or writers for young people and the world of literature at large. Tonight's guest, Varian Johnson, is the author of 9 novels, including The Parker Inheritance, which was named a Coretta Scott King Honor Book, an Odyssey Honor Audiobook, and a Boston Globe Horn Book Award Honor Book. And The Great Greene Heist, which was named to over 25 state reading and best of lists. He received an MFA from Vermont College of Fine Arts, where he now serves as a member of the family of the faculty, and he and his family live here in Austin, Texas. And about the Parker Inheritance, the New York Times Book Review wrote, Johnson writes about the long shadows of the past with such ambition that any reader with a taste for mystery will appreciate the puzzle Candace and Brandon must solve. The Parker Inheritance received starred reviews from the Hornbook, School Library Journal, the Bulletin of the Center for Children's Books, and Kirkus Reviews. And from Kirkus Reviews, I'm going to quote, Johnson's latest novel holds racism firmly in the light. Candace and Brandon discover the joys and terrors of the reality of being African American in the 1950s. Without sugarcoating facts or dousing it in post-racial varnish, the narrative lets the children absorb and reflect on their shared history, a candid and powerful reckoning of history. So please join me in welcoming. So we've been trying to get this scheduled for maybe about a year or something. So I'm really excited that you're finally here with me and I can ask you all my burning questions. So the Parker Inheritance is about two young people, 12 and 11 years old, Candace and Brandon, and they embark on a sort of treasure hunt. Yeah. They need to solve a mystery of a hidden treasure that can really save this town that they're in. So they're also both really avid readers, and they sort of connect and form a friendship over reading. And it mentions the novel The Westing Game.
Sure, yes.
I didn't read that one, but I did read a lot of other books when I was young. And so I want to start by talking to you about childhood reading. Sure. And reading mysteries and adventures, and how race becomes a factor in that. Like, so I grew up reading Nancy Drew and these books by Enid Blyton, which probably I don't know if you've heard of.
I'm very new. I've never read them, but I do know of them.
Yeah, for some reason, Indian kids, like, I don't know if it's like some kind of mind control experiment, where like, given every single Enid Blyton book that's ever been written. So I grew up reading these famous 5 books, and I love these books. They've turned me into readers, but I also got the impression that solving mysteries or going on adventures, looking for treasure hunts, looking for treasure is something white people do.
Yes, exactly.
So was that your experience? I'm imagining it probably was. And when did you get a longing to write what you didn't get to read as a young person?
Oh, good. I mean, that's a good question. A lot of different things in there. I think, I think you're right. I think when I was growing up, there were a number of books that featured African American kids. But the majority of those were kind of brought out February 1st for good old Black History Month, and then kind of put back at the end of the month. And a number of those books dealt with slavery or civil rights. They were historical, and as much as I loved reading those books, after a while I got really frustrated. I felt like, well, okay, we ceased to exist, after the 1960s. What about now? Do we exist today? And almost to a point where I almost came to resent Black History Month, just because it was very much, I felt in my face, oh, look, here are all the Black books. Oh, would you love to read this? Oh, good boy. Like, yes. And I'm like, God, yeah, but I love mystery. I love science fiction. I love all these other type of books too. I love the Chronicles of Narnia. I want to see myself in those books. And I don't know, I think I was aware of it. And I really became aware of it when I found contemporary works that featured me. The author Walter D. Myers, who passed away about 5 years ago, very prolific, award-winning, wonderful man, wonderful writer. He had this book called Motown and Dee Dee, which I read when I was around in 6th grade. And that's when things really began to click for me. Okay, this is a book that's kind of like kids who are like me. Not exactly. Those kids lived in Harlem, lived in New York. I grew up in South Carolina, but they were Black like me. And that really spoke to me. I discovered Virginia Hamilton as well, too. And so now I'm starting to find all these other books where I see myself in them in a certain way. And I wanted kind of to contribute to that. I wanted to write as well, too. And it morphed over the years. I love contemporary books. I really, really love contemporary. But also, I didn't want to get pigeonholed into just writing contemporary stories or Black stories. Or I want to write something, things that interested me over kind of a multitude of genres, including mystery, because I loved them growing up. And I thought, well, yeah, why can't a Black kid be the hero of the story here? And that's kind of sort of how it evolved.
Yeah. When did you start writing?
Well, I was writing ever since I was a kid. It was in college when I started writing for publication. That's when I kind of figured out, oh, there's a job that's called writing and that you can get paid for. Not much. Very, very, very little. But there's a job and I'm really passionate about it. So I started, really intently, picking up the books about writing, trying to write novels, sending query letters out to agents while I'm in high school, in college. And then kind of picked up from there. Doing that, I went to college and got my bachelor's degree in civil engineering. So I was a civil engineer while I was writing and figuring out writing. I did both of those for a number of years.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the Parker inheritance, where it started, sort of what the seed of it was?
Sure. Well, you mentioned the Weston Game. Ellen Raskin's wonderful Masterful The Weston Game. It was published in 1978, won the Newbery Medal, among other awards. And I remember reading it as a kid, growing up, and loving it. I loved it. It's a puzzle mystery. When I say puzzle mystery, there's information in there where you, as the reader, can try to solve the puzzle along with the characters. Sometimes you know more information than the characters even know, and I love that, reading it. And while I was in my MFA program in writing for young people at Vermont College of Fine Arts, I read the novel again because what Ellen Raskin does in that book, she has a number of characters. I was really interested in characters in books with these different point of view characters and how that's done. And she has maybe 16 in that book. So I read it over and over again. And as I read it, I thought, wow, this puzzle really holds up well. There are some parts of the book that are dated. There's some things that I'm sure she thought she was doing the best thing, but representation is kind of lacking. It's not what we would call exemplary now. But the puzzle held up really well. So I thought, I would love to do this puzzle mystery. And so I had the puzzle for a number of years, but I didn't have a story to go with it. So I had this puzzle. I love math. I'm an engineer. I have this really kind of elaborate math puzzle, and I'm stuck. And then one day I was going through my files, and I had a note about this multi-generational story I wanted to do, following a family over 100 years and how they dealt with racism and how they were shaped by it. And at the time I wrote it, I thought, this is great, but I'm not ready to do this book. Then I thought about that, and this one I thought, well, maybe it's all about perception, how we see things, maybe I can find a way to lace these two ideas together, and that's kind of the genesis of it.
Yeah, so yeah, there's a braided story in this with the story of the Washington family
That's
in
right.
the 50s and the current story.
Yeah.
So I will read the West End Game, but is that,
Yeah, look,
so that was
okay.
like an innovation you came up with?
Yeah, I mean, the Western Game is really great because it does have this puzzle and you're following these characters through, but I was really interested in not just the puzzle part, but commentary on social justice and how we're seeing racism, how racism is still prevalent today, and how it's prevalent in the 50s. And so I thought it was important to show both of those in the present and the past. And the characters are reacting differently to it, and it feels a little different, but it's still there. It's still, maybe in some ways it's more coded now, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I guess it frustrates me sometimes when folks say, oh, we're in this kind of, this society now where we're almost past racism. Like, oh, you are so wrong. It's just you can't recognize it because you don't see, fire hoses being turned on kids. But like those things are still very much in play. It's just seen. It just depends on your perception if you see it or not. So yeah, it was important to have that braided story in there between the past and the present.
So I have a theory that who we get to see come of age in our culture corresponds with who gets valued and who a society at large sees as fully human. And I used to be a teacher, so there's part of the reason I'm so passionate about these books and so excited to interview you. So, I'm an educator as well as a writer, and so when I was teaching, it was very frustrating to see how little discussion there was about racism, how very surface and shallow the discussion was, and but also there was a larger problem. You sort of spoke to it in that the literature, you just did not get to see kids of color growing up, and part of that is we needed more of the literature, and part of it was people were completely ignorant of what was out there. So I was really excited to hear about this Iowa state read, and you said San Diego. Can you talk a little bit about those? I guess I have two questions.
Sure.
One, to talk about how those kinds of initiatives get started, and what are some things you've learned in this process about having these kinds of discussions?
Sure. Those are really, really cool. The Parker Inheritance is a book for young people, but it kind of sort of is meant to be a book that can be read by a number of people. I guess every book is that way, but this book has adult characters in it. It does cover some very important topics and themes, but I think in a way that's appropriate for young readers. But as I was writing the book, towards the end of it, we started thinking, well, this is a book that can work for younger readers as well as parents, older readers, high school readers, and they can talk through all these different things. And maybe it's a different conversation for someone who's in 3rd grade versus someone who's in 12th, but those themes are still there, and they're still digestible in the book. So really, these two things, the book was picked as for the most part, as an all-city read by City of Pasadena, and then it was picked as one of the 3 books as an all-state selection. Iowa Kids All Kids Read Selection. I'm probably butchering that. I'm so sorry, Iowa. Along with the book Hey Kiddo and a novel as well too. And those are great because it does encourage reading, a number of people to read it, and conversations that happen for it. But even have on other levels, like the Texas Library Association has something called the Spirit of Texas Awards. The list, and this book is on their list for middle school. It's just all these great activities for the book. And I guess that's important because it puts the book out there for a number of readers. I do not want, no author wants their book to be pigeonholed, and certainly I don't want someone to say, oh, this is a great book for black kids. I think it is, but I also think it's great for white kids, and any type of kids, and adults, And I think we focus, as we rightly should, on creating books that are mirrors, so we can see ourselves in them, but they need to be windows as well too. Sliding glass doors is a term coined by Dr. Dean Sims Bishop. Books can be all these things for different types of people. I remember as I was writing this book, I was thinking it is important for young white kids to understand that racism still exists. And while you can see a police officer and be very safe and happy, that is never my first reaction. It is never the first reaction. And you may not understand why, but there's a history of why that happens. And you don't say, oh, well, things are different now, because it's very much not the case. I don't know, it's just important for all readers to be exposed to all different types of books. And also, different types of books with different types of characters, genres, things like that. I remember reading To Kill a Mockingbird when I was in high school. I love To Kill a Mockingbird. I think it's a wonderful, great book, but that can't be the only book someone picks up to understand race. Because it's a book where a black person suffers for the enlightenment of the white person. And that dehumanizes us in many ways, that we're a prop.
Yeah.
And while this is a great book, it just cannot be the only. I cringe when I hear that's the only book that a class is reading during the school year. It needs to be, it's just a wider discussion, a wider array of books.
I mean, I remember I was shocked when my stepson, who's now 21, he brought home his high school reading list, and it had not changed since I was in high school.
Exactly.
I was like, oh dear. I'm just curious, has there been any pushback, or has it?
Yes, yeah, there has been, and I'm surprised.
By pushback, I mean racism.
I'm not surprised. Homophobia is you get most respect from. There's a boy, Brandon, who's questioning in the book, and then there's other gay characters in the book too, which I guess, Brandon, the main character, is one of the main characters is questioning, and a lot of people have issue with that. And I remember readers saying, well, I feel like I got cheated, or tricked into reading this because it's not on the flat copy, it's not on the introduction of the book. But when do we have to identify all these different things? And does that invalidate a person if you don't, or the reading experience? And you're saying you don't want to read a book about someone who's gay? Are you pretending it doesn't exist? It's mind-boggling. That surprised me. I thought it would get pushback for the racism. I thought it would get pushed back because I think there are some tough parts in the book, and I thought someone would say, oh, well, maybe this isn't appropriate for a young reader, although I think it is. The homophobia, I'm really surprised about. Really, really surprised.
I didn't even think of that. Well, I was wondering so you go around the country and you meet a lot of young readers. Is there anything in particular you've observed about young readers today, or
Agreed.
it's good to know?
Yes. And they're reading all types of books, and they have their own opinions on them. I love sitting down with any reader and having a big discussion about a book and what they like. Sometimes they will tell me what they don't like, which I think is valid. But just these kind of very nuanced discussions where we talk about what's right or what's wrong. And I remember there's a character in the book named Chip. Chip is a great guy. He's a great white guy who's also racist. But the fact is, we just live in a racist society. That is just the way that it is ingrained in our system. It doesn't necessarily make you a bad person. You just have to recognize you're doing something racist and you need to do better. We just have to do better. I think about, when I think about misogyny, I think about it the same way. I think society is built that way. We have to do better. We fail, but we endeavor to do better. And I think Chip is the type of character that a number of white students will come out and say, oh, you know what, I really appreciated reading that because he's not a bad guy, but he's really doing these really wrong things here, and he doesn't know. Yeah, that's the way it happens. Sometimes we don't know because it's been indoctrinated in us, but once we know, we can do better. And Chip really tries to do better throughout the course of the book, and then he kind of shows up later on too, briefly. Or just, we recognize it, we do better. That just is the mantra. That's just the way it has to be.
I thought he was a very interesting character. Well, what led you to write for, I agree actually, I think that your books, people of any age, I really enjoy them. But what led you to write for young people?
I love that age. I love all the firsts that come with being a young person. So, first love is so great before we're old and jaded, right? First love, first heartbreak, discovering opinions that are different from your parents and acting on those and understanding them, realize that your parents are not perfect, but that you can love them anyway. Having value of self outside of your familial unit. I just think that's all really riveting. I just think it's really interesting, all these firsts as they're happening, exploring that in books. I often tell readers that it's not my job to say what's right or wrong. I try to give very, very few opinions in it. Yes, racism are wrong. That's kind of an opinion I have. But I think most things are very nuanced. And I think it is not my job to answer the question. It's my job to ask the question. And I think every reader has their own thoughts on it, and they wrestle with those things a little bit. And then try to come to conclusions with themselves, within groups, as they're getting older and older. I always tell young readers, the world is really messed up, but you guys can fix it. You guys are so smart and so amazing. You can literally save the world. We've just really screwed it up in all ways, from climate change to racism to poverty, socioeconomic, everything. We screwed it all up. But you guys have the intelligence, the drive, the understanding, the ability to fix these things that we've done wrong. And please don't feel like you have to wait. There's so many young people who are activists now. You can be activists in your own little way. And I tell folks, I choose to be activist by writing books and writing certain things in these novels. It's my way to get across what I'm thinking in the way that's most effective for me. Everybody has their own different way of doing it. This is the way I do it.
Yeah. I have a couple more questions, and then
Sure.
we'll see if anyone from the audience has questions. So this is, I haven't figured out yet if this is an overblown controversy. It's definitely part of the conversation of whose story you're writing. And you've written from the perspectives of many different types of people.
Yes.
Do you find that, one, I was just wondering in general if you have an opinion about that question of whether writers need to stay in their lane, as far as their identity. And what do you find challenging or stimulating about writing about people whose life experiences are different than your own, which is the job of a writer also, right?
It's a nuanced thing. There's no right or wrong answer. I think I get very frustrated when someone comes to me and pitches me this idea, I'm writing about this thing, about this black kid in the South, and then what do you think? I'm like, I think it could be great, but don't take that and say, Varian Johnson gave me permission to write, this black guy gave me permission to write a book, because that's not what I'm giving you. No one can give anyone else permission to write a book. I do strongly feel that. There's an author, an award-winning author, Grace Lynn, who has this great essay on her blog. She also runs a podcast, and she talks about that's not the right question. Can I write this thing? The question is, should I? And and it goes deeper. Why do you want to write this thing? Why do you feel equipped to write it? What impact does it have writing it? Can you? Yes, technically we can do just about anything as writers. Should we? Is really the question. I will never belittle an author for trying to write outside of their lane, writing from a different gender or ethnicity. Just get it right. And getting it right means a lot of different things. And I'm not qualified to say what is or isn't right for the majority of things, even about what it means to be an African American. I am very qualified to speak about what it means to be Varian Johnson, this particular African American, but outside of that, it gets very, very muddy. So yes, write what you want to write, but do your research, be respectful, and ask, should you write that? Should you write that book? What is the harm that could come from it? What's the harm? Harm is a tricky thing. I shouldn't have said harm. Harm is tricky. I get frustrated when they say books harm. Like they kind of do, but like we have to be very. It's nuanced. Every book can harm someone in a certain way, right? Every book can make someone upset. If a book makes everyone happy, it's not doing its job, right? It's gotta be. We gotta have nuance. We gotta push buttons. Some push buttons more than others. So I hate when someone says, do not do harm when you're writing, because that's kind of BS. Write things that ask hard questions, and some people may not like it, and that's okay. You have to be comfortable with that. And I guess I'll say one other thing. I think it's interesting when writers get very tense when someone says something in their book is racist. And I think we as writers have to let certain things go. I think a reader can say that. I mean, we don't get tense as much when someone says, oh, I really hate that this character died at the end. Like, oh, well, that's always the definition for it, Oh, I really hate this thing is whatever. Oh, you're right, I made that typo, I gotta fix it. Oh, I really hate that this book is racist. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, I offended everyone in the world, I'm so sorry. Oh, yes, be sorry, but like, just do better. And also, it could be the intent. There's certainly a difference between a character being racist and a book being racist. And no, I'm rambling. I was talking to someone, and they were like, oh gosh, this character is so racist. I'm like, yes, they are. Like, aren't you glad that, are you afraid you're going to offend someone? I hope you are. Someone is offended if they read about a racist character. But they can ask those questions. And just because a character is racist doesn't necessarily mean the author is. What we do, if we're doing something intentional, we're doing it for that reason. But again, it's nuance, right? It's nuance because certainly we don't want to do something where an idea is overtly racist and can offend a really, really large group of people. I mean, I think that's something we should ask that question. And we should ask it, and we should have a feeling about what we know what the answer is, and be ready to deal with the answer no matter what.
I love what you said about ask hard questions. I think that actually, I think part of what we want to do is create complexity and actually things you said earlier about being a mirror, being a sliding door, being a window, you're all these things. But part of what you're trying to do is capture the complexity of the world. It's not, these are things that there aren't easy answers. And, part of literature is to get under your skin, right? But people make mistakes also, and if you make a mistake or you've done something unintentional, you can do better.
You can do better. You can say, I'm sorry, right? I will do better. I'm sorry for doing this specific thing. I'm going to do better about it next time.
So last question from me. The way you handle violence, there's some bullying, there's the racial violence, and I really agreed with that review that said you don't sugarcoat, but you do feel how oppressive it is, like the fear of, you just can't ride your bike anywhere you want because of this fear, and yet it doesn't, it's there, it doesn't take over the whole story. I don't know that that's exactly what I want to say, but it's not, it doesn't become what all the characters are about all the time. So how do you get that right? Was that a long process? Was it?
There's certainly a lot of revisions. But tweaks. I mean, I think at some idea, I had an idea of what I wanted to show with these different scenes that are challenging. And I think, there's something you have something and you can describe it lightly, or you can cut away and describe in vague detail, and the reader will fill in everything they need to fill in appropriate for their age and their level of what they can take. And I want to think about how these things are seen through different characters. How violence is shown, how it's portrayed. I'm scared yet, so I don't like gory stuff. I don't like super scary stuff. I don't like things that are extremely violent, unless it's cartoony, I guess, maybe, I don't know. But you can't talk about civil rights and racism without, and even homophobia, without talking about violence and what happens to people who are seen as different, who are seen as other. What happens, I mean, there's a true cost for, trying to fight the system or being like you are, and I thought it was really important to show that in different ways. But it's funny. There's a number of scenes in the book where someone's bullied or pushed or violence or something or fights, right? Excuse me. But there's a scene where Chip, the good white kid, right? The good white kid who's trying to do right, who's trying to understand it, who's trying to be a good kid, who's trying to be a good friend, right? He finds out that the Washington family's been attacked, and he finds that there's this doll baby that's been covered in tar, and it's horrible words scrawled on it, right? And a noose tied around his neck, and it's described enough where the reader can fill in what they need to. And I wanted to write that from his point of view because I thought, okay, this is something that you're going to get. I think it happens all the time. I think I'm going to speak for men because we're horrible about it. I think so many times men will say, oh, I never really understood this until I had a daughter, which is kind of BS. Like, you really should understand, you know what, rape and misogyny are a problem, right? You really should not have offspring or a wife to know that. But it does happen. And I think in Chip's case, he understands in theory racism. He understands that things are wrong. He understands that things are dangerous for people of color. But until he sees this thing, this brown, this black scarred doll that is dressed and meant to be this young woman who he claims to love, it really hits home. This is dangerous for her. This is her. This could be her. What type of world am I living in? Yeah. And that, again, when I talk to kids, that's really interesting when they say that because they can see his reaction and they think about, oh, well, if that had been me, if someone I cared about happening to it, how would I feel?
Yeah. That scene was amazing.
Thank you.
Well, I think I'll open it up to some questions.
No worries, no question.
I have a question.
Sure.
I was just wondering, really good points, and sort of like you were talking about Nancy. I mean, I grew up reading like the Hardy Boys.
Sure, yes.
All that kind of stuff. I also have read the Weston Game, which is great.
Yeah.
But my question is, do you think it's possible to write a book with, let's just say, a lead character or characters of a particular ethnicity, let's just say non-white,
Sure.
where it's not so self-evident that they are of a particular ethnicity, but that their actions and that the storyline and the plot and all that kind of stuff, portrays them as good people and they're the heroes, so to speak, of the book. I mean, do you think it's possible to write that book and then in writing it, sort of keeping in mind the perspective of, let's just say you're writing it for young adults or younger people,
Sure.
that they might not be able to pick up on all of the social justice or other sort of contemporary issues that we have, but they might be able to identify with that character, even without that character being so sort of expressly identified as being, this ethnicity,
Yeah.
and kind of like achieve more or less the same purpose. And because I think when you first started talking tonight, you were sort of making the point that, like, growing up, you were reading these books and you couldn't really identify with any of the characters. And I guess kind of implicit in that is you just kind of got the sense of, like, well, these people are white or whatever. It's like the Hardy Boys. Like, it never says, like, two white guys, but you just, they're white.
Sure.
I mean, they just are. So I just wonder, you know what I mean? Like, if you wrote, like, a Hardy Boys, but with two Puerto Rican kids, do you think that you could succeed in kind of like, like just say a Puerto Rican kid read the book and was like, wow, I can really identify with these guys. Maybe throw in some cultural stuff that kind of helps to identify. Do you think you could achieve some of the same things doing it that way, as opposed to maybe bringing in some of the more, like I said, modern problems, more overtly kind of raising things like racism and things like that?
Sure. That's a complicated question. Easy answer, yes. But I think we have to, as a writer, our job is to do our due diligence and get into the skin of that character, who they are. I don't think a book has to be overtly about race or racism or misogyny or whatever ism, let's say. But I do think those isms color who the character are. If you're running a book about a character of different genders, and if the character is going for a run early in the morning at 6 a.m. or 10 o'clock at night, it's going to be very different whether it's a man, a boy, or a girl, right? The reaction is going to be very different. Depending on the neighborhood, it's going to be very different if it's going to be someone who is white versus black versus Puerto Rican, depending on where they're running. So I think there are certain things that are going to be prevalent no matter what for most people of color. And I think our job as writers is to get in that skin. I think, does a book have to be about racism necessarily? I have a series called, the Jackson Green series, the first book is called The Great Greene Heist. And I think, and that book does not have overt racism, but it does have certain microaggressions. There's a character in that book, a secretary, an administrative assistant at the school. And she makes this comment, and she's always getting the Asian kids mixed up. And that's not about racism, but it is about racism. And it's something that you notice after a while, if someone can't tell the difference between this kid versus that kid versus that kid. One's tall, one's short, one's lighter skinned, one's darker skinned, but they're all the same to her because that's the way she is determined to be, and that it doesn't matter. They are so insignificant, it doesn't matter to her to do that. I think a kid of color would pick that up and recognize that. So I guess to say, I don't want to say we can't just pepper stuff in there. I think a reader will read something and see something and say, oh, this is inauthentic just because the character put a couple of Spanish words in here. Okay, now there's certainly Puerto Rican character. That probably won't ring true. But when we get into the essence of that character, we can kind of portray those things. The things that are natural to the character will come out. What they're eating, what they're saying, how they're speaking to their parents, their religion, kind of all of these things will kind of come into play and make it a richer book. That's not saying that it can't be done. It's been done all the time. I think I have many writer friends, and so let me. Is it okay?
Keep going, yeah.
Kirkus, wonderful Kirkus reviews. For children and young adults, they started this policy of identifying race in the books, and it really just pissed a lot of people off. And I'm like, why are you upset? The default is white. It's been the default for years. Why is it we only have to get called? If a book has a black character, it would say, and this black character standing up against justice or whatever. That's valid. But the other book can't say that? Just be default white. Well, what if it sounds negative? Why is it negative? White is white. And if you don't like it, do differently. Well, they shouldn't assume. Yes, but they do, because our society is coded white. Just like you mentioned about the Hardy book.
Right.
It is coded white.
Right.
Change it, but don't give me the, I just want readers to see what they're going to see, because that's bullshit. That's bullshit, and it doesn't happen. And so just, I get very frustrated when characters don't want to state the ethnicity of a character. And I fall into this trap younger in my career, and they go out of their way to describe everything about this character. And I'm like, oh, come on, when you see someone, what do you see? You see that they're black. Just mention that they're black. We won't die. I like being black. I like my brown skin. It will not offend me if you say that. But we've been taught so long to avoid that word. We've been taught that race is wrong. Race isn't wrong. Racism is wrong. Race is beautiful. We can talk about that. We can say we're of all these different ethnicities, these different backgrounds. Mention that in the book is not a bad thing. And it's what we notice when we see someone for the first time. It's okay. That kind of got off the rails a little bit, but all I'm saying is...
No, I was gonna say that's good. I mean, it kind of reinforces really the reason I asked the question is it just seems to me kind of along the lines of what you've been saying is that it would be really hard to just write a book because things are so coded, like in our society, maybe white, it'd be really hard to write a book without bringing, if you wanted to write a book with, let's just say, whatever, pick an ethnicity,
Yeah.
you would really want to identify that ethnicity and maybe even some of the struggles historically that that particular group has gone through, et cetera, because it's almost like you can't avoid it. So that was I was asking the question kind of backwards just to see how you would answer, because I just feel like, yeah, at the end of the day, it would be really tough to do, like, and at the end of the book, you're like, wow, I think those two lead characters were Latino. I mean, that really, but you'd get no flavor of that, and it would just be kind of like, well,
Why write the book?
Yeah.
Which is why.
No, it's an interesting conundrum almost,
Sure.
that you almost have to do that. You have to write in that way. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think the main thing is that you have to embody the character that you're writing about.
Right.
When you were saying you get in their skin, I mean, I think that is where, if you are not fully embodying that character and writing from a place of empathy, then it's gonna, I don't think you're gonna, I'm just speaking to writers in general, you're not gonna succeed in actually having a full fleshed out character. There's a scene, you were reminding me, there's a scene in Americana, I don't know if you've read that book, but they go to a store and they're trying to identify who the saleswoman was who helped them with something, and they're like, well, she was wearing this, and she was the only black woman in the store who was and the main character was like, oh, for God's sake, just say it. But those just sort of reminding me of that. But yeah, I mean, I think it is interesting how when white people are just described as people, and that when there's a character that's of color or a minority character, they're defined as their race. So, any other questions? Do you still work as a civil engineer?
I do not. I love that job. I love the paycheck every 2 weeks, especially. But no, I write full time now. I just own the road too much to do that.
So what are you working on now? Have you started any projects?
I have so many projects going on. I have a graphic novel coming out next year. Graphic novel, long comic book, about two twin girls. I'm a twin. I've always kind of wanted to do something, and the twins pop up a lot of my books, it seems like. But I wanted to do something about twins in middle school, starting 6th grade. So it's about twin girls. They find out one girl, Maureen, is more quiet, reserved. Her sister Francine's more outgoing. They've been put in separate classes. Maureen thinks it's a fluke. She finds out her sister requested it. Maureen gets so mad, and then she decides to run for student class president against her sister. But so hijinks, some other things there too. The illustrator is Shannon Wright, this wonderful, amazing artist who's working on the book now. I'm so sorry, Shannon, I'm making her do so much work on it, but it's going to be phenomenal, and it comes out, I think, in the fall next year. I think October is what we're thinking. And then after that, I've got a couple of other books coming out that I probably shouldn't talk about because they're not quite done yet, but that's the next big one coming out.
Just the Great Greene Heist, those are sort of like a caper kind of. And then you have mystery. Do you have like a science fiction thing you want to do?
I have an idea about a science fiction one, but it's kind of, I'm smart enough to know I'm not quite ready to do it yet. I kind of take notes on it, and every couple of months I pull out my notebook and add something to it. There's 2 pieces I've got to fix, and then once I figure them out, then I'll be ready. And most books are like that. The Parker characters was very much like that. I wasn't ready until I was, and then it worked. So I have faith in that part of the process. Not much else but that.
All right. Any other questions? Well, we'll be sticking around for a little bit so people can come and talk to you. Can you join me? And I love having you. And this is the last Borderless for this year, so thank you for sending us off for the rest of the year.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.